Okay, we have another piece of ordnance from history here from the Vietnam War. This is the Viet Cong foot mine. I know it could be considered part 2 of the toe popper, but really this is its own variation by itself. So it's separate video. Now this booby trap or improvised mine actually appears in Vietnamese literature. It's referred to as the step mine or the mosquito mine. I don't know if they're referring to the exact same thing or if there's slight variations between the two. Now in this one, our mine housing here that contains our actual explosive content is an expended 50 caliber cartridge, a BMG cartridge, or a 20 millimeter casing. Now some of you are probably saying, well, why 20 millimeter? We use 25 millimeter on the Bradley. 20 millimeter is what is used or was used on the AH-1 Cobra gunship and is also used on the Apache gunship, the AH-64. So they used large caliber casings they found laying on the ground, looked at them and said, we can turn this into a mine. So we got our board here, square piece of board. It has 3 pegs, wooden pegs in it. These are our guide rods with the casing in the center here. Now, unlike with the toe popper, there is no nail coming up through the board. Our firing pin is a stiff piece of wire right here between the pegs that is fastened to the side of the cartridge with a metal band, and when you look at the pictures of it online, you'll see it's kind of crimped to hold it in place. They didn't solder it. They crimped it to yank it tight, keep the piece of wire right there. Comes down, 90-degree angle, and then another 90-degree angle with our little firing pin piece here, which would come up to the center of where the primer was. The existing primer was obviously used. It was replaced with a extra sensitive primer or a homemade sensitive primer. That's what it says in US literature. It just says it's a sensitive primer. So one that'll go off pretty easily. The explosive content inside the casing was black powder, which would have been homemade. Now some of these mines, they were just black powder, which would probably be as kind of an early warning device, or they would put in broken glass, shaved glass over the top of the powder. That is in violation of international law. I think any guerrilla that would think about copying this design now, they should use more your traditional shrapnel. Probably think on the lines of ball bearings, really small nails, really small bits of metal. And obviously, because it's black powder, you're going to have more powder by weight than the shrapnel, because black powder is a little bit underpowered. The top of this casing, so say the top 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 inch at most, they put in there molten wax, which would harden so you'd have a wax plug to waterproof it. Because remember, black powder does not react well to moisture. So even down here on our little sensitive primer, they'd have to make sure that they waterproofed it well. This gets put into a hole that's just the size of the mine. Like with the toe popper, I got a feeling you'd have just a little bit of the top of it sticking above the ground, and then it would be camouflaged with grass. Another possibility is you have a hole the size of the foot, or at least the front of the foot can fit down in easily. You don't want the foot to bridge over the top. In the center of this hole would be your mine, just below the surface. You'd have just a light cover over it of some sticks and some grass. GI would step on it, break through the cover, putting full pressure down on this, driving this down. Our stiff wire here would slide up along the side in the banding. So it needs to be tight, but not super, super tight. This casing, either the 50 caliber casing or 20 millimeter casing, gets forced downward right onto the piece of wire, setting off our extra sensitive primer, setting off the black powder, detonating a really big shotgun shell basically under the person's foot. So, pretty devastating. I actually found out about this morning when I was looking up some decent pictures for the toe popper and its different variations. So, pretty straightforward, not that difficult. This probably is something that does appear around the world. It's just we don't hear about it much. We hear about the large IEDs, you know, when they modify 122 millimeter, 152 millimeter, 155 millimeter artillery shells as IEDs, but you just don't hear about this stuff much anymore. And when you look back in Vietnam, they just say a homemade landmine, homemade pressure device, homemade booby trap. So, but interesting variation. Not too complicated, and I got a feeling it'll blow off a person's foot. You know, it'll take off everything in front of the leg. You know, and potentially if you step on it with the heel, it'll tear your heel out and probably a section in the bottom of your lower leg there. So now, with all pieces of ordnance, every one of these ordnance videos, we got to put the disclaimer in there. Do not make one of these now. You will get caught, you will go to jail for a very long time. But if we have aliens invading, you know, they're liquefying people in New York City with their death rays and their heat rays. You know, we got Chinese Marines are charging up onto the beach in California. You know, we got Russian paratroopers are appearing in Calumet, California. You know, at that point, hey, you got an idea how to make something to protect yourself and cause some hurt on the enemy. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot Militia Movement, always remember, SA-ONS.